While House impeachment managers argue their case that former President Trump laid the foundation for the Capitol riot, a federal investigation is revealing more about the planning that went into the attack. So far, federal prosecutors have charged at least 211 people for having alleged roles in the January 6th insurrection. That number is growing by the day. Over 400 criminal investigations are now open. CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge has been following it all, and she joins us now from Washington. Hi there, Catherine. So as we learn more and more details about what took place on January 6th, I want to go back to something that actually one of our viewers had a question on, and that is there had been some reports, notably from Representative Mikey Sherrill, a Democrat of New Jersey, that she had said it appeared there were groups doing what she called reconnaissance inside the Capitol ahead of the attack. What exactly do we know? Has there been any kind of new information on that front?
Well, earlier today, Elaine, I was able to confirm through a law enforcement official that the Sedition Task Force here in Washington, this is the lead group that's looking at charges against the rioters, is reviewing allegations that there may have been support from lawmakers helping rioters with doing advanced legwork or reconnaissance so they would understand how to navigate their way on the day of the riot, January 6th. I was also told by this official that the Sedition Task Force is looking at the issue of whether there was foreign support in this operation as well. But I want to preface that by saying the official said that they had not seen any evidence so far indicating that there was reconnaissance done with the aid of lawmakers or foreign support, but that these were significant issues that would be thoroughly reviewed.
Okay, got it. So at this point then, Catherine, what does the investigation show about the premeditation and planning that went into the attack on the Capitol?
Well, Elaine, really these suspects in the riot fall into two buckets. The larger bucket so far are individuals who acted or allegedly acted in the spur of the moment. So on January 6th, they entered the Capitol. They tried to obstruct the proceeding, kind of like a sort of crowd mentality. And then in the other bucket, which is smaller and I think even more significant, is you show evidence or alleged evidence of significant premeditation. There's one group that I think really stands out so far in the court records, and that's this group called the Oath Keepers. The FBI describes it as a loose coalition of militia who believe that the federal government is systematically stripping away the constitutional rights of American citizens. And what we saw on the day of the riot was really twofold. We saw what looked like groups using military-style tactics to navigate their way into the building. They also wore military-style gear, so flak jackets. Some wore helmets. They also had walkie-talkies, or they used ham radio frequencies. And then what the court papers now show or allege about three, Crowell, Caldwell, and Watkins, is that they began their discussions and communications about January 6th as early as the day of the presidential election in November. And this has always had my attention because this is 2 months before the riot. But based on what we heard from the impeachment managers today, they make the argument that President Trump was seeding this, what amounted to like an escape hatch for himself in case he lost the election. And he started building that narrative long before January 6th. And I've always wondered how that would reconcile with the court records. And I think you can make the argument that when you look at this particular group and the allegations against them, this explains or goes some way to explaining all of that early activity right after the November election. I want to actually go back and start scrubbing these records again, looking at some of the data points that were raised this morning by the House managers to see if that coincides with upticks in activity among these groups.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see sort of sequentially here those events, as you know, leading up to January 6th. So you've reported, Catherine, that the federal investigation into the Capitol riot is one of the largest in U.S. history. Give us a sense of where it stands and what more might be coming.
Well, you know, we had this, what I would call sort of that initial flood of indictments and charges. And I think folks at home may have been confused thinking, wow, these don't seem like very big charges. But those were what they call initial charges or holding charges, and they're used by federal prosecutors to kind of get you in the gate, so to speak, legally, while they try and see if there's other evidence to build more serious charges against you. And right now, they've got a pool of 500, think about that, 500 potential suspects in this case. And that goes to the hundreds that went inside the Capitol. And the acting U.S. attorney here in Washington, Michael Sherwin, has said that if you went into that building and you were not authorized into the building, you will be charged, even though it's a tremendous strain on their resources. And on the other hand, what they're doing is that they're building these more complex cases. I talked about the conspiracy cases with the Oath Keepers, also the 3 percenters. What they're actively considering is whether there's enough there for sedition charges. Sedition would require the prosecutors in a court of law to show significant evidence of intent and motive. And it's really difficult in almost any case to get inside the mind of a suspect. But that's how high they're reaching in this investigation.
What about some of these broader groups? You've obtained internal law enforcement records about the riots. What did they say about the radicalization of these broader groups?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and I talked about this idea that the radicalization to this extremist ideology may in fact mirror what we saw after 9/11 with the radicalization of Americans inside the United States to ISIS and al-Qaeda. And I just in the last few days was able to review an intelligence bulletin that was put together by Homeland Security and other law enforcement agencies. It's like an outlook document, like what to expect in 2021. And the section that really caught my attention was on this issue of radicalization. And it talks in depth about how social media in particular has sort of created what amounts to of an echo chamber. You're able to surround yourself with like-minded people, and it's very reinforcing. And it's that kind of reinforcement of the message which helps people get over that threshold to violence. So you and I were on the right track based on that bulletin when we talked about radicalization the other week.
So at the top, Catherine, you kind of addressed this next question, but whether investigators are considering whether these rioters had outside help and who that might be. It sounds like sort of everything is on the table right now with respect to what they're looking at potentially, but obviously it's too soon to draw any kind of conclusions about that.
That's correct. And the short answer is they are looking at whether there was some kind of foreign support to this operation. The obvious place to look would be money, but not just money, but also the amplification of these extreme messages. You know, sort of dial it back to 2016 with Russia, which is where we saw these bot accounts amplify racial divisions and other divisions in this country. So they're taking that same sort of model and template to see if it was at play here as well. But based on what I heard from my contact, they had not seen evidence of that to date.
Finally, Catherine, the FBI reward for information about the 2 pipe bombs recently went to $100,000. What is the latest on that part of the investigation?
Well, I think one of the most, noteworthy developments with the pipe bombs, and just to recap for folks at home, those pipe bombs, the FBI believes, were planted on the evening of January 5th, so the day before the riots, outside the Democratic National Committee and Republican National Committee headquarters. Both of those offices, this is important context, are within a few minutes walking distance from the Capitol. And the timing was, I know, confusing to some investigators because originally they thought, when the devices were found sort of midday on the 6th, that it was designed to be a distraction to pull first responders away from the Capitol at that same time that the rioters were breaching the building. But I now know that there's another working theory that's under consideration, which is that those pipe bombs were in fact meant to go off on January 5th to create a significant security event that they hoped would shut down the Electoral College vote and confirmation the following day. So that goes to the idea that it was connected to the rioters, but not in a way that many investigators originally suspected.
All right, chilling to hear more and more details here as the investigation unfolds. Catherine Herridge in Washington for us. Catherine, as always, we thank you so much.
You're welcome.